The Sixers season is over. I mean, it was already pretty much over, but now it truly is, with Joel Embiid now shut down for the season. So what happened? Well, the Sixers basically said that Joel Embiid is medically unable to continue playing this year. He's been dealing with knee injury stuff. He's had to do a bunch of stuff before basically every single game just to try and get ready to play. At no point did he look healthy this season. He was not healthy. And even though the Sixers continued to try and delude themselves into thinking that at some point he would get healthy and at that point they would be contenders, neither of those things would ultimately be true. And this up and down roller coaster of a year they've been going through is now finally over. Embiid didn't even get to 20 games this season, and although I approve of the decision and I think it's smart, it certainly is not a surprise. So what does this mean now for the Sixers? Well, it certainly is a lost year for them because they really did put a lot into this season. It might be lost on a lot of the fans around the league now, but this was pretty much an all-in year for the Sixers. Before the season started, the belief was if Joel Embiid could be healthy, be an MVP caliber guy, and then you've got Maxey and Paul George and some of the other offseason additions that people really liked on the margins with this roster, that they would have a real chance to contend this season. And the whole point of the Paul George contract was to try and contend this season and then maybe next year. Because even people that were optimistic about the Paul George contract knew that at some point in year 3 and definitely in year 4, he was going to break down, just not be good enough, and this roster was just not going to be championship caliber. So you're really paying for the last 2 years of the deal with the first 2 years of the deal and trying to contend. And this was, if they ever had a window to try and win a title this year and then maybe next year, were that window. And at this point, it became so clear this season that even if Embiid was playing, they were not even remotely close to contention, that they decided to shut him down. And really what they're trying to do here is they're trying to position themselves for next season in 2 ways. One, they're trying to keep their draft pick. They owe their first round pick, top 6 protected, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And now that they've shut down Embiid, I would presume that they're probably going to shut down Paul George at some point here pretty soon as well. They have a real chance at getting into the top 6 in the lottery, which would change everything for the Sixers. Adding that much talent to a roster that before the season they felt like already was worthy of contention, whether they were right or not, doesn't really matter. They still feel that way. And adding a top 6 pick to this roster would be huge. There's also obviously the outcome and a possibility that they will give the 7th, 8th, 9th pick away to Oklahoma City for free. But at this point, given that they didn't really have a real chance of doing anything in the postseason anyway, there's really no downside to them tanking, ending the year with a bunch of these guys resting and recovering from injuries and trying to get that top 6 pick regardless of whether or not they are successful. And as I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a couple of these other guys rest as well. Paul George has been dealing with injury stuff the entirety of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play that many more games the rest of the year. I think Maxey probably will, just because there's no real injury stuff to hold him back. But at some point, the Sixers are going to try and lose a bunch of games because regardless of what you think about the team building strategy that is tanking, in this particular scenario, it is absolutely the right decision for Philadelphia. But now we have to think about the future. What does this season, what does them shutting Embiid down mean for the future of the Sixers? And the first question is the all-NBA version of Joel Embiid just gone? I think at this point it's clear that the MVP version of Joel Embiid will not return. He will not be healthy enough to be that guy ever again. But the all-NBA part of it, I think, is still a question mark because offensively he can still get his numbers, but the level of impact just was not there this year because he was just shooting a bunch of jump shots. He wasn't nearly as dominant in the paint, and defensively he wasn't even remotely close to the same guy. Part of Joel Embiid's MVP candidacy was about the fact that he was a really good rim protector, someone that was awesome defensively just because of his size at the rim, and that guy was not there for the limited games that he played this season. Granted, injuries can take a lot out of you, but moving forward for a guy that can't move, isn't healthy, and the downfall of bigs, the decline of bigs athletically, physically, in terms of their play happens quickly, you have to wonder if the all-NBA version of Joel Embiid is just gone, and that would obviously be a disaster for the Sixers. Now, if we assume that the all-NBA version of Joel Embiid will return once he is healthy next season, this whole situation, this whole season can actually turn out to be a good thing for Philadelphia because of the pick situation that we talked about earlier. If they can get everybody on the roster healthy going into next year, they get Paul George to figure out whatever this weird season was for him, and Embiid's an all-NBA caliber guy next year, Maxey has another year of seasoning under his belt, Jared McCain comes back, and then you get a top 6 pick. Maybe they can trade the pick if they want to for somebody else, or they can just use it to try and, build out the rotation and have a nice young piece moving forward. Next year, as crazy as it sounds, they could actually have a real chance to make some noise because you have the entirety of the roster that you thought you had going into this year, but you have Jared McCain, who got hurt but was really, really good for them in the beginning of the season, way better than they thought that they would be, and you get the top 6 pick. That could actually be a really nice core. But there is no guarantee that that's actually how things are going to go down. One, they have no guarantee they're actually going to keep their pick. Two, they have no guarantee everybody's going to be healthy next year, that Embiid will ever be healthy ever again. And three, you don't know what's going to happen around the roster. First question being, do they keep Nick Nurse? It has not been a very good Nick Nurse season at all. I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to move on, even if they feel like the roster has a good chance of making some noise next year. This could be a situation where the season just went so poorly and the vibes are so bad that they feel like they have to make a change at head coach. The other part of this is, does the front office or ownership panic and look to potentially trade someone like Joel Embiid or Paul George, even if they don't get that much value out of them, just to get out of the contracts, just to move on, and then build around a young core of Maxey, McCain, and then potentially the top 6 pick that they get in this draft. And I think that's the scary thing right now for Sixers fans, is you have no real idea of what direction they're going to go in from here. At this point now, you know they're going to be bad, they're going to try and keep their pick, but there's a version of this where next year you go into the season with healthy George, Embiid, Maxey, McCain, and then a top 6 pick, and all of a sudden, a year from now, you could be looking at a Sixers team that's on pace to win 50 games and make some noise in the playoffs for really what will probably be the last real year of prime Joel Embiid, or something close to prime Joel Embiid. But then there's also a version of this where they just get rid of a couple of guys, try and get out of the contracts, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a complete reboot in Philadelphia, even though they don't have access to all their first-round picks moving forward. And the biggest barrier to option number 2, I'm sure there are Sixers fans watching this video thinking, hey, kind of moving on from the whole Paul George Embiid era sounds kind of